Let's begin with someone who managed to protect an entire community, Jenny Field. Jenny appears in Friday the 13th, Part 3. She worked as a camp counselor, helped with training, and was studying child psychology at Packanack Lodge, not far from Camp Crystal Lake. When Jason Voorhees began murdering the people around her, she didn't just flee, she relied on what she'd learned. Everything seemed normal at first. Jenny and her co-workers were preparing for their counseling roles. They even joked about the local stories involving Jason while relaxing at a nearby bar. As the rumor went, the only thing anyone really knew was about his mother. He never attended school, never made friends. Her boyfriend Paul retold the tale of Jason drowning when he was young and his mother snapping afterward, going on a killing rampage. Jenny suggested that if Jason had actually lived, he'd be hiding out in the wilderness, deeply traumatized. No one believed her. Then the murders began. Paul went down, and Jenny was left scrambling. Her car failed to start. Jason attacked, stabbing a pitchfork straight through the roof of the vehicle. Jenny escaped and crawled under a bed, terrified to the point that she lost control of her bladder. Jason searched the room. She assumed he had moved on, until he suddenly appeared again, revealing he had been waiting for her. He lunged. Jenny retaliated with a chainsaw and managed to flee into the forest. There, she stumbled into Jason's rundown cabin, illuminated with candles surrounding the severed head of his mother. That was when her psychology background truly mattered. She grabbed Pamela Voorhees' sweater and slipped it on. When Jason smashed his way inside, Jenny spoke to him gently, like a comforting mother.
You've done your job well, and Mommy is pleased. Now come to Mommy.
She disguised herself as Pamela. Jason froze in place. This towering murderer stopped instantly, believing his mother had returned. Jenny used his emotional scars and fixation on his mother to get close enough to seize his machete. She struck him across the shoulder and lived. Jenny's knowledge of psychology turned Jason's most vulnerable point into the very thing that saved her. At just 12 years old, Tommy Jarvis was the one who actually killed Jason Voorhees. But the experience never left him. Years later, he was still plagued by terrifying dreams and lingering trauma. Convinced the only way to free himself from it was to destroy Jason's remains, Tommy decided to exhume the corpse and burn it, hoping that would finally silence the nightmares. Terrible plan. During a raging storm, Tommy and his friend Alan broke into the cemetery. They dug up Jason's rotting body. Tommy suddenly relived the past, panicked, and lost control. He yanked a metal fence post out of the ground and repeatedly stabbed Jason's dead body. At that exact moment, lightning struck the post. The surge of electricity reanimated Jason as an undead powerhouse with monstrous strength. Jason instantly slaughtered Alan. Tommy ran for the police. Sheriff Garris dismissed the story and tossed Tommy in jail. Meanwhile, Jason rampaged through Camp Forest Green, killing counselors and eventually murdering Garris and the rest of the deputies. Tommy understood that if anyone was going to end Jason, it had to be him. The only way to stop Jason now was to return him to the place where it all started.
The only way now to stop Jason is to drown in 1957.
With the help of Megan, Sheriff Garris's daughter, Tommy formulated a plan. Crystal Lake was tied to Jason's death and identity. It was his anchor point, his vulnerability. Tommy gathered a huge rock, a heavy chain, and several padlocks. He rowed a boat into the lake's center and poured gas around it, creating a burning ring on the water. The flames drew Jason in. Jason boarded the boat, smashing it apart, but Tommy was ready for him. As Jason attacked, Tommy looped the chain around Jason's neck like a noose. The chain was connected to the massive boulder. The weight yanked Jason straight to the bottom. Jason dragged Tommy under as well. Tommy began to drown. Megan jumped in, rescued him, and even used the boat's propeller to carve into Jason's neck. She pulled Tommy back to shore and revived him with CPR. Tommy's plan had succeeded. Jason was now shackled to a giant stone at the floor of Crystal Lake, trapped beneath the water where he could no longer hurt anyone. Tommy turned Jason's own past against him, returning him to the site of his death and transforming the lake into a prison. Joel bails out of town in Scream 2. Joel, the new clean-cut professional cameraman in the sequel, makes one of the smartest choices in the entire film by getting out while he still can. He shows far better judgment than his predecessor from the first Scream, Kenny Jones. After being hired as Gale Weathers' replacement cameraman at Windsor College, Joel quickly grew uneasy about her obsession with chasing the killer's trail. Once he read her book and discovered what happened to her previous cameraman, he understood exactly the kind of danger he had stepped into. Fortunately, Joel wasn't too stubborn to admit that not reading her book beforehand had been a major oversight, an oversight that nearly cost him his life. Catching up on that history is likely the reason he survived at all. Joel's choice to leave the area was undeniably smart. After Randy, one of his closest acquaintances on campus, was murdered, Joel realized he needed to make a move immediately. He did come back briefly to record Gail's exclusive statement, but the moment she and Dewey decided to leave campus themselves, Joel sensibly followed suit and took off again. Joel may not have been a central figure in Scream 2, but the decision he made ranks among the most intelligent survival choices in slasher film history. Laurie turns a coat hanger into a weapon in Halloween. In slasher films, survival often comes down to ingenuity and the ability to convert ordinary objects into tools for defense. That's exactly what Laurie Strode manages to do when she's hunted by Michael Myers in the original Halloween. As a babysitter, Laurie isn't just responsible for herself. She's also tasked with protecting the children in her care. With fast thinking and sheer determination, she straightens a wire coat hanger and transforms it into an improvised stabbing weapon. She drives the hanger into Michael's eye, momentarily incapacitating him and forcing him to drop his knife. Laurie then seizes the knife and plunges it into his chest, buying precious time for the kids to escape.
I want you to tell them to call the police.
Laurie's actions highlight how, when confronted with life-threatening danger, being adaptable and clever can mean everything. Instead of freezing in terror, she relies on her wits and inventiveness to outmaneuver her attacker and safeguard both herself and the children. Dana hits the big red button in the cabin in the woods. This film checks every classic horror movie requirement: the eerie remote cabin, the clueless group of college friends, and a shadowy organization orchestrating the entire nightmare. When two members of the group, Dana and Marty, end up trapped by a squad of heavily armed operatives, it appears their fate is sealed. That is, until they stumble upon a strange control panel with a giant button labeled System Purge. With no time to think and no other options, they slam the button, completely unaware of what it will unleash. What follows is total chaos. Every horrific creature imaginable floods out of containment, tearing through the guards and annihilating everything in sight. Amid the carnage, Dana and Marty seize their opportunity and escape. It's a wildly effective strategy, but it instantly raises an obvious question. Why does a button like that exist in the first place? Who possibly decided that one switch should have the power to unleash an entire army of nightmare monsters? Karen pretends to be too terrified to pull the trigger in Halloween. In Halloween, Karen Nelson devises an unexpected strategy that turns out to be one of the smartest maneuvers ever pulled off in a slasher movie. While being pursued by Michael Myers, she stages an emotional collapse.
Help us! I can't do it!
By faking paralysis and pretending she's frozen in terror, Karen lures Michael into exposing his position. The moment he steps into view, she instantly snaps into a firing stance and blasts him in the cheek. This tactic not only takes Michael completely by surprise, but it also creates the perfect opening for her mother, Laurie, to re-enter the fight. Laurie uses that advantage to strike, ultimately sending Michael tumbling down the stairs into the basement. Karen's deception underscores how vital clever planning and mental sharpness are in a slasher scenario. Rather than depending purely on force or firepower, she leverages psychology and misdirection to seize control of the situation. It highlights her absolute badass nature while reinforcing the idea that surviving a slasher villain demands both physical skill and strategic intelligence. The medical lab with live facehuggers crawling around them. They have no weapons, no way to defend themselves, and shouting for help is pointless. The infirmary is sealed off from the rest of the base, and none of the Marines know they're in danger. Ripley and Newt try smashing the glass to get attention, but it's too thick, and no one hears a thing. But Ripley isn't someone who freezes under pressure. She notices the fire safety sensor mounted on the ceiling, and that sparks a clever idea. She pulls out a lighter, ignites it, and holds the flame up toward the detector. Within seconds, the system triggers. The blaring fire alarm reverberates through the facility, immediately alerting the Marines that something's wrong. They sprint to the infirmary and arrive just in time, fighting off the facehuggers and rescuing Ripley and Newt before it's too late. The cotton trick. When you're tied to a chair and moments away from having your mind swapped out, you don't have the luxury of hesitation. You need to improvise fast. In Get Out, Chris had already sensed something was off during his visit to his girlfriend's family estate. Still, no one could have predicted the extreme lengths the Armitage family would go to in order to keep their guests permanently. Once Chris discovers that the clinking sound of a spoon circling inside a teacup is the trigger used to hypnotize him, he realizes the only way to stay conscious is to block out that sound entirely. So he does something unexpected. He rips out pieces of cotton from the padding of the armchair he's strapped into and packs them tightly into his ears. When the family's accomplices enter the room to wheel him off for the operation, they assume he's still under hypnosis, completely unaware that Chris is fully alert and ready to fight back. Ironically, the cotton from the very chair meant to keep him restrained becomes the tool that gives him his freedom and ultimately saves his life.